For someone who's not so technical, what is data privacy?
The reason I bought the Facebook idea is that many times you don't see how big the data business itself is.
Right? I think privacy is something we all want.
I like a world with Terminator.
I think in time to come, privacy will be a very fundamentally important thing, Shanaka.
So this is very sensitive data, extremely sensitive data, which should definitely not be shared with other employees in the company or externally.
As a part of our campaign to create awareness on the Personal Data Protection Act of Sri Lanka, today we will be talking to a few interesting people about how they use personal data and how they are getting ready for the Personal Data Protection Act of Sri Lanka. First of all, thank you so much for being here. So to start off, would you introduce yourself and could you tell us what you do?
So my name is Dilanjan Seneviratne.
So I'm Chaya.
Well, I'm Asanka.
I'm a lawyer. I practice in the areas of, say, company-related law, corporate law, intellectual property, data privacy.
I'm a music executive. I work in business of music. Our vision is to take culture to the world. But in simple terms, what we do is we help artists make money.
I run a company called Lovi Ceylon as a fashion company. Before that, I used to work about 20 years in Silicon Valley in the US in technology. To round it off, I have a public policy degree from Kennedy School, and that's what kind of brought all these things together for me to come to Sri Lanka.
Cool. And do you know why you're here today?
I don't.
Well, we did have a brief chat where you explained to me about speaking of data and the importance of data, understanding what data is and so on.
Okay, so we're here to talk about data and data governance. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the types of data that you use on a day-to-day basis?
My layman knowledge, I would say, so especially the employees first, and then their names, details of whereabouts or whatever. Then our artists, that is the most sensitive stuff. Their data is also with us, like their phone numbers to family information to even sometimes even health information, contracts, who they work with. We also produce a lot of shows, music shows. People buy tickets to come for these things. So those information about from those, I believe, that's the kind of data we work with.
When it comes to HR, whatever industry you work in, organization you work in, there's a lot of personal information, data that we collect from our employees, which is legally required. So that data is universal to any organization or industry when it comes to HR. And also it's a legal requirement that we retain that data in the form of a personal file for 5 years after a person has resigned from an organization also. So those are basic data that is used on a day-to-day basis by HR.
For our fashion company, the most of the data is essentially transaction data, right? So people buy online, people buy through our shops. Their credit card information is the most valuable piece that we need to secure and make sure that happens that way. Fortunately, we are working with trusted gateways to make sure that transactional information is protected. The second type of information is essentially behavioral information. What did they look at on the website? What did they search? That type of behavioral information and personal information like name, phone number, previous purchasing data, measurements, all of that type of stuff.
In today's day and age, there is a lot of data about us all around the world. From a technical standpoint, we call it a data vapor. Each of us have a data vapor. And if you look at the different aspects of you that have been collected on various systems around the world, you'll be surprised as to how much of an accurate picture all this data can create about you. So the question is, do we want to keep that private? Because I think there is a lot of private things that we've shared with various systems. Right? To give you an example, hospitals have medical history. Then schools have educational history. Then the banks have financial data. Now, various social media apps that we are a part of have various correspondence also we have with people. Our WhatsApp has a lot of information. Now, how if someone has access to different pieces of data that we shared with different people, right? Would they be able to manipulate that data to get to our detriment? Or also, would that portray a picture about yourself that you don't want the world to know, right? Either way, it boils down to privacy. So that is fundamentally what privacy and data privacy is all about. If you're looking at it from a legal context, it means the laws that have been passed to protect privacy, to ensure that each of us have respectful lives.
Yes, so all of that is data. You're handling healthcare data, personal data, employee data, all of that is data as well. Also, stuff that you produce is also data.
You mean like songs?
Yes, absolutely. All of that is stored somewhere, right? I'm guessing in hard drives or maybe on the cloud or wherever, right? So that is your data. This data is also your intellectual property.
Because a person's, any employee's personal details, like from their age and religion, from their medical records to their personal addresses, phone numbers, next of kin, all of this is gathered at the time of recruitment. You know, there are instances when we have faced where someone, you know, some situation goes on with an employee outside of the organization, completely unconnected, but they would call and say, how can I get hold of this person? I can't communicate with him or her. So it is very important that anyone working in HR is very much aware and restricted from sharing that sort of information, because it is illegal also.
To share this data with an outside party.
Outside party or within the organization with another employee even.
Right. So this data that you handle, especially in the HR field, is not only important, but it's also sensitive.
Very extremely sensitive.
Right. So from what I understand is that there's a lot of trust that your customers put when they are buying something from you, and you are responsible to protect that data.
Yeah, e-commerce data, like anytime you're transacting on the web, when you're putting your credit card information, there's trust that that information is handled, and largely the banks and the processing partners have done a great job establishing that trust, and that's why today we see a lot more uptake on e-commerce compared to even 5 or 10 years ago.
Right. So my question to you is, how important is data privacy? Can you explain it in a way that an average person understands this?
So I think data privacy will be, especially in this AI age, Shanaka, a very, very important component of our lives. Simply because AI is all pervasive, it goes into all aspects of our lives. And if you look at some of the scandals that have been cropping up, AI has also been used to manipulate people's personal data in a big way, right? So if we go to some of the cases historically, right, for example, the Cambridge Analytica accusation that was made against the 2016 US election, where it said that data had been manipulated to accurately distill a picture of who was a Republican or who was a Democrat.
Right.
And that was used for micro-targeting of advertisements. So privacy is something that's important, simply because people can manipulate that data. Also, you and business would not be able to function if we don't have rules and regulations governing privacy. Like, for example, your financial data. Like the security code on the back of your credit card, if it's used along with the other aspects of a debit card, people can take money off your account. So fundamentally, you have a right to keep certain things very personal.
But when it comes to HR itself, now this sensitive information which I spoke of just now is totally governed by HR, an HR department. So anyone who comes into an HR department has done a basic HR course where they have learned the importance and the legalities of this sensitive information. So if we were to hire an intern or a trainee, we would sit them down and explain that sensitivity and the legal requirements and restrictions and so on. Also, we sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. In every person's file, there would be a non-disclosure agreement, so that if any information is leaked out, it can be traced, especially now. If it's verbally leaked out, it's very difficult to prove from whom or whatever. But even then, if you take a larger HR department, like say you have about 10 people in an HR department, there's always people who, not everyone handles the payroll. There'll be 1 or 2 people handling the payroll, 1 or 2 people handling the recruitment, onboarding and life cycle, other people handling engagement, training and development, and so on. So the training and development people and the engagement people may not have access to the entire personnel file. So if some details do go out, then you would know it's either from the payroll or the recruitment and onboarding or employee life cycle team. But of course, if any information is shared through email, official email, then obviously there is a digital history. You can track that and trace back and identify that.
So in a situation where this trust is lost, what would the impact be for a company like yours?
Well, first of all, embarrassment, and in a big way, but also potential liability of how that information is used by whoever takes that information, right? So we see like many times, especially the banks are announcing all these hacks into their information systems. Total chaos.
Okay. Would be a complete worst case scenario for your company.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's fortunately we have architected our behavior so that we keep very little information.
So there have been instances when, not necessarily for bad reasons, but sometimes, some employees would have attractions towards each other, and then they would want to send flowers or, something to the attracted party. Want the dress or something. And then an HR person can think, okay, there's no harm in this. And they would share it. But there is a lot of harm in it.
Of course.
Because the rule is a rule, the control is a control. So we have faced situations like that. So in that instance, now let's say the party whose address was shared finds it extremely offensive and files a complaint saying my data has gone out like this and I find it, completely out of order. Then it would be a disciplinary action, which could even result in the termination of the party who gave out the information, not the party who asked for it, because the party giving out the information is the HR person who should have known and not done that. So there have been instances like that. The main thing is to have that trust and trust within the team that the information doesn't go out. So to build a trust, it's not just setting in rules and regulations, it's building a team spirit where the understanding is there that if one person in HR slips up, the entire team is the trust and confidence in HR is lost.
The reason we have these kind of systems or regulations or frameworks is because you essentially don't want trust. You want a system that replaces trust with transparency, accountability, and being able to examine and verify. And it replaces the need for individual trust. That is what we are trying to create.
So Dilanjan, you mentioned that you do a lot of online ticket sales from your company. So what kind of data do you collect when someone purchases a ticket from outright?
So basic information for sure, like the name, mobile number, email.
Right.
And we try to stop it there.
Right.
But say when we do a show like a big artist show, like a known artist show, and limited tickets.
Right.
Now in this case of Kankalu, you can sell up to 10,000 tickets, so we don't really need to limit that.
Right.
But in some cases, some venues, we can only put 1,000 people. Now the chances of, because now the demand is higher, the chances of forging a ticket is higher. So to mitigate that, we would even take the NIC detail also in that case to just make sure verify for verification purposes.
Right. So you're basically collecting name, mobile, email, and sometimes the NIC. Right. These are called PII data, which stands for personally identifiable information. Right. So if someone has your name, ID, all of this is easy to tag somebody or pick somebody. Are you aware that there's a new law called the PDPA law in Sri Lanka?
From you, actually, today when we had this chat.
Well, I think Sri Lankan companies are really ramping up their readiness in terms of the PDPA, as we saw by that symposium that was organized by the Bar Association, and I think the Bar Association did a great job in that. But speaking to many of the guests that came there and different speakers that came from different organizations, I definitely realized corporate Sri Lanka is ramping up and getting very ready for privacy. But of course, some corporates are slower than the others. We'll have to wait and see as to how important people will weigh, how much value they will place on privacy. But I think it's just one of those things that there was a speaker at the symposium that said PDPA readiness is like having a fire extinguisher on the wall. Right? When the fire starts, you definitely need it and you need your readiness for it. In time to come, with more and more issues that may crop up, you would find people will align themselves more and more with regards to PDPA. But yes, as per readiness, I'm confident people are getting their acts together.
I think our reliance on that is to find partners who can help. Our fundamental business is not this. So our fundamental business is fashion company, right? So we are focused on the creativity, creating the type of styles or the clothing or the brand positioning, all of this conversation. So the tech stuff, we definitely need partners who can guide us and to make sure that we are in track legally and also rightfully, that not only the law but the intent of the law. So we always want to be on the right side of it, and we will seek guidance from people who are a lot more following that to help us be in clear. We will not be able to build a tech team to go do these things. So we want a tech provider coming, maybe like Xapi or somebody else coming and say, look, this is how you transition that. And we will rely on the platforms that we use, our databases, to provide that as a layer or add-on to how we maintain data.
So that particular act has not impacted the practice of HR so much, because we already have so many labor laws which govern HR and HR practices and HR processes.
So there's a new law called the Personal Data Protection Act, or PDPA. So according to law in Sri Lanka now, if you are collecting this personally identifiable data or PII data, you are required to manage this data in a certain way. For example, any organization, let's say a restaurant to a production company like yours or entertainment company like yours, if you're collecting this data, now the data owner, person who's giving your data, has the right to ask if this data, where this data is stored, or if they want, they can ask you to delete that data. So, for example, let's say now I come to your website, I want to purchase a ticket, Kankalu, and I put my name, Shanaka, blah, blah, blah. And after 2 weeks, I would call you up and be like, listen, I've given you my data, but I no longer want you to have my data. Okay. And if I say that, you should, according to the Sri Lankan law, now you should have a system to review this data and to delete this data. And also, if the regulatory body asks, you should show proof of the deletion of this data. This is where we come in. We are a company that provides a unified governance platform, and in that we provide the data governance part as well. So we help, first of all, organizations look at the data that they have, identify the data that they have, and to figure out where their data is in the first place. Because you can't govern what you can't see. And then we help them classify this data. In your example, you said you have their names, phone numbers, emails, and also sometimes the NIC. So all of this data should be classified. So we help you classify this data because not all data can be treated the same, right? So if you have someone's personal health details, that would be ranked at the top in the data charts.
Okay.
And also we would help you manage these requests. If someone wants to delete their data, you should have a process internally, right? And when the regulatory body or someone from the government wants to see this, our platform provides that proof that you manage this data properly. And when someone requests the deletion of this data, that this was handled and it was actually deleted. As an expert in this field, how would you advise a company who is just starting to look at data privacy and protecting the personal data? What are some of the early advices that you would give an organization who's just getting into this?
So, Shanaka, I think first and foremost, it'll be good to realize the value of privacy. All right, especially value towards your clients as well. I've seen some organizations using it as a branding tool to say, look, we protect your personal data, right? And we are the custodians of your personal data. We take your data very seriously. So such organizations, I think, are really excelling because they are building trust with their corporates. But apart from that, I think in time to come, there will be a pushback from society saying, look guys, if you're using our personal data, you need to make sure that it's safe, that no one takes on my financial data, no one knows where I live, no one knows my phone number. People stop sending me various emails and various text messages, right? Because this is my private data. I haven't shared it with XYZ. So I think in time to come, corporates will realize the value of it. And I think corporates will also see it as important as other ESG components like sustainability, and it'll be a governance tool. It'll be a governance requirement in time to come. And I think given the speed the world is changing and how data centric the world is becoming, I think the push would be sooner than later.
I think it's a serious part of your business and building your reputation and trust with your clients. So I would say pay attention. I think if it is like that, it's like if the government gazettes a new tax that we have to pay, or a regulatory mechanism, that certificate that we need to develop or provide to conduct business. This is one of those things. So get one of your departments, or either your finance or security or HR or IT to look into this and provide a solution to it.
I mean, this is a fundamental law. I'm sure you've heard of GDPR in the EU, and every country is coming up with their own version of this. Because Sri Lanka is doing this specifically because we cannot attract foreign direct investment in a country where there is no proper data laws in place. For example, let's say a UK company wants to set up a factory or a business process office or whatever, right? They cannot bring their data to Sri Lanka or process their data in Sri Lanka if we don't have a proper law in place to give some importance or that has some sort of legislature in that country. So this is a law that has been brought in by the government. In fact, we are the first South Asian country to bring in a personal data protection law. So in that way, we are ahead of our neighbors.
I mean, just to learn a bit more, I couldn't be bothered about a pizza ad coming to my phone when I'm passing that. Right?
Yeah.
So is it necessarily for the individuals to call up the businesses and be like, please stop sending me these SMSs?
Absolutely.
That there's no yes, it is annoying, but does it have an economic impact, or is it like looking at a very larger scale to tell the foreign investors, hey, we have these things in place.
Yeah.
So how does
I would say
what's the
both.
difference?
I would say both. Right now, when you bring a law like this, it doesn't just apply to enterprises; it applies to individuals as well. Right now, as a culture, we have a very
No, that's what I want
Yeah.
to also understand.
Yeah, so as a culture, we don't give importance to our personal data. For example, right, there's a certain burger restaurant in Sri Lanka that I went recently where I couldn't buy a burger unless I give my phone number. Of course, I understand the Personal Data Protection Act, but I was hungry, right? And I just wanted to eat something, and I ended up giving him my number, and I am someone who's in this field, right? So if you look at the Sri Lankan culture, right, there are certain buildings that you can't get into without giving your phone number and NIC number, all of this, right?
Yes.
This was
I have to give the NIC itself.
exactly right, and where is this data going, right? So if you have to give your phone number to every security guy, right?
What's the risk is my question.
No, so this now when we are going into a whole digital world, right? These data can be used to misinterpret or misrepresent you.
So you always have a right to say no, that you're not going to give data that is in excess of what is required for the contract at hand. Right? So if someone's doing a contract for you, like for example, a hospital is taking you in as a customer, then the hospital has a right to ask you certain data which is in relation to the tool, relation to the task at hand. But anything in excess, you can always refuse. Similarly, if you're going to order a burger and that person insists on asking you for your phone number and your email, you can always say no. Look, give me the burger, right? And if they say, look, we're not going to serve you the burger unless you give me your phone number, then of course you have the right to always walk away and say, look, I'll go somewhere else. But I think in time, it's important for people to really realize that privacy is important. I think privacy is very important, and of course, I think the Personal Data Protection Act, and this is a misconception a lot of people have. People think that it only surrounds text messages sent to your phone. No, it surrounds a lot of other personal data that you share with companies on a day-to-day basis. And it's important to protect that, simply because if you look at how data has been manipulated around the world, you would realize, look, there is 1 in 100 person who would use your personal data for some extraneous purpose that you would never even expect. Like for example, micro-targeting of advertisements, like what was done in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So I think in time to come, given AI and given the things there, data manipulation is going to be a big issue. And using data to even change people's minds based on your wants and your needs, I think will come to a very mature state in time to come. So it will be important for us to control our data.
Cool. I want to talk a little bit about this book that you have written, A Speech to Sri Lanka from 2048.
Yeah.
What is this book?
This book is essentially a vision and a plan on how to get Sri Lanka to be a developed country. To be more specifically, how do we go from roughly 4,000 per capita GDP to 40,000 USD in per capita GDP? Meaning, how do you get your current income 10 times larger? Right? And what would be that Sri Lanka look like? What kind of businesses we might have? What kind of areas that, what is the texture of that Sri Lanka look like? And how do you get there by 2048? What is the minimum set of things we need to do to get to that Sri Lanka?
Right. So this is not just a vision that you have put out, but it also includes a plan.
It is a plan. It is a step-by-step plan on how do we get there with names and dates and things we need to do.
Right.
But it's written in a kind of a narrative form, like so you can read it like a story instead of reading like an Excel file.
Right.
Nobody likes to read Excel files. Maybe there are some. Most of us like to read a story instead of an Excel file.
Absolutely. And in this vision, sure, you've outlined a lot of things, the social aspect, infrastructure, financial aspect, all of that. But since you're a tech guy also, what does the tech future in 2048 look like for Sri Lanka?
Well, look at this way. If we are next to India, one key business area that, since we are talking about data governance, one key area is that we can be the disaster recovery hub for many, or a second disaster recovery hub for many Indian businesses all around the world. For China, we could be the data processing or the back office, especially with our English-speaking audience, and for them to be working in the ASEAN region. So for these things to happen, I think the ability for the data, not only the privacy of the data for Sri Lankans, but the ability of the data to cross borders. Indian companies are able to actually send their customer information to a data center in Sri Lanka and have it be legal, have it be protected, have it be processed to provide customer services or any other services, and be able to transfer that back. This conduit needs to be created, and these are large businesses that we can create based on that. I mean, everybody's familiar with this little company called Facebook, right? Or Meta now. What is the business of Meta? It's a company that is essentially relying on data.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a data business. They are selling data to advertisers. They are selling entertainment to us. So essentially, it's a data business. Just want to take a guess of the last year's revenue for Meta.
Probably in the billions of hundreds of billions, I would say.
Last year it was $200 billion in revenue, and this year it's projected to be about $230 billion in revenue. To put it in perspective, the entire Sri Lankan GDP last year was about $80 billion. So if Facebook was actually listed and operated out of Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan GDP would be 4 times.
So these companies are larger than some of the nations, including our nation.
Much larger. What I'm trying to point out is data is not only about privacy, or it is the gold, or it is the oil of the future of businesses. AI is run on data. If you are looking at a future, any kind of business that you are creating out of AI or using AI, it runs on data. So being able to have access, create data in a protected and a very transparent manner with partners that we can trade is very important. That framework is very important.
Absolutely. Now, I think we are touching again on the trust factor, right?
Outside employees will not look at just one employee, they look at the entirety of HR, and the trust and confidence is lost. So that understanding needs to be built within the team, as well as having laid down rules and regulations.
So building that trust culture is paramount when
Paramount in HR,
right.
The team spirit in HR. Understanding that the personal file, because a lot of people can think the personal file is not so important unless your own personal data has gone out. So that those discussions are held definitely between, and also if you take a department, finance and IT, that not the entire department are involved in an HRIS or related stuff. So IT would have a particular team who's managing the HRIS, and finance would have a particular team that handles a payroll.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about entire departments having access to a system also. So it's very important, even in an HRIS now, I mean most HRIS systems have restrictions that can be set in. Even within the HR department, not every single department person would have access to the entire HR system.
Yeah.
Let's look at financial data. One of the biggest issues are leaking of financial data, right? Which can be used for so many purposes. I mean, that's a fundamental data that you need protected. But let's look at some now around the world, right? Now, globally, especially in the EU, you have GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. So each country in the EU has a data protection office. And that DPO is very, very vigilant, especially with regards to the big tech companies. So I remember Facebook was fined, I believe, $1 billion. I'll get back to you on the exact number, for sharing data that they have collected in the EU with the US. So just the transmitting of data and the fact that it's not processed in the EU, the EU Data Protection Office, I believe it was Ireland, found that to be a breach of privacy. Right? So the rest of the world is taking data privacy very seriously, right? Especially with regards to the big boys, the big companies, the big tech. Now, I'd like to see what happens in this Grok instance. That might be something that'll come out. Now, for example, even TikTok was sued. TikTok was sued because the default setting on TikTok is not, for children especially, is public, and it doesn't start as private. So on that basis, the world is now going through a state of conformity, especially with GDPR there. But you might pose me the question, how would Sri Lanka want to align with this growing trend around the world, especially when it comes to privacy? And I think it's important because the rest of the world considers their privacy important, right? So if we have to do business with them, they would want some level of confidentiality, a high level of protection with regards to systems, right, when sharing data, especially cross-border data or whatever, doing business with us. You don't want me sharing that information with the rest of the world, right? You would want a level of trust. So I see the world also looking at privacy, personal data privacy, in the same way. If people from the EU are to come to Sri Lanka and stay in our hotels, they expect our hotels to maintain a standard of privacy with regards to their data. They don't want some other third party emailing them or some other third party getting in touch with them, or that data leaking out to various different parties. I believe this is the time of director's cut. You have a right to have a free for all and work with different tools. We never had these tools before, but always be respectful of people's rights. And organizations that do that would also realize that they build sort of value with their customers.
That trust with that customer.
Trust with their customers.
Which is the most important thing.
The most important thing.
The PDPA Act is just the beginning of your governance journey. We here at Xapi are trying to make governance effortless. If you want to learn more about how we're helping companies become PDPA compliant, visit us at Xapi, that's XAPI hub.io. Thank you so much for attending this podcast and being a proponent of data privacy in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much.
I hope I was helpful.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Thank you very much.